Philadelphia, was that in September? Such a long time ago, it seems like. Can't believe it was September. They talked about a lot of different things, and one of the things that just struck me out of the whole event was the emphasis on seeking God's kingdom. And so every year Bob always puts up we always put up a banner. Bob has a theme for the year. Last year somehow we missed out on getting a banner done, but this year I asked him, could we have the theme be seek first the kingdom? Because I feel like this is the foundation. And there's a song, we're going to sing it later, it says, let's see if you guys know, seek first the kingdom of God and all its righteousness, and then what will happen? All these things will be added to you. And this comes out of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and 6 and 7 is where the information I'm talking about today comes. And I really wanted to say, okay, great. It's kind of cool, isn't it, to say, seek the kingdom. Okay, go do it, folks. Well, what does that mean? How do you seek the kingdom? Well, I want you to look on the back of your bulletin for a minute. And do you see the outline here? Do you see all the different points? Look at that. We're going to be here a long, long time because you can see how much stuff I have to cover. No, we won't be here a long time. But we have a lot of things to talk about. And the reason we have a lot of things to talk about is Jesus talked about a lot of things that he made this very succinct in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Jesus taught many, many other things through his parables and through his actions, through the things that he did while he was healing, as he was challenging the people like the Pharisees and Sadducees and things. He taught a lot of different things, but his core message, I think, is right here in the Sermon on the Mount, starting in Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes. And I just want to go over these things really quickly because not everyone is going to apply for each of us at every single moment, but some of these are going to apply to all of us sometime. And the first thing that you need to do as you try to seek the kingdom comes from the Beatitudes where it says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Recognize that you are poor in spirit. Now, not all of us are richer than we might have been in spirit. None of us are probably as poor in spirit, unable to understand what God wants as we might have once been. But we need to recognize that we do lack in our spiritual development. We need more from God. And we not only need to recognize that we do, but especially when we're extra poor. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm really poor in spirit. I mean, I just need God so much, but I can't really grasp a hold of what I need to be doing. So the first thing, recognize that you're poor in spirit. Admit it. That's how you seek the kingdom. Because if you think you've got it all, you've missed something. And God can't reach out to help you when you don't think you need anything. The next thing you can do to seek the kingdom is mourn. Do you know Jesus mourned? Jesus was sad. He mourned, he lamented over Jerusalem when he saw all the stuff that was going on. He was sad at the way some of the Jewish leaders acted. He cried when his friend died, Lazarus. He mourned. He recognized loss. When we're willing to recognize loss, we open ourselves up to God filling us, to replenishing, to giving us back. That's one way to seek the kingdom. Be willing to mourn. Be willing to be sad. To be willing to notice these things. Then be meek. Again, Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. It's not just saying anybody who out there is meek. I think he's telling us we need to be meek. It's part of being part of the fruit of the Spirit, too, to be humble and meek, to not put yourself forward beyond what God would have you to do. Yes, recognize your value. Yes, recognize that God has a lot for you, but also realize where you are still needing more, where you can still grow more. Don't think of yourself as having arrived yet, because none of us are going to make it till we get to heaven. The hunger and thirst after righteousness. Do you truly hunger? Are you really thirsty for righteousness? What's righteousness? Somebody, what's righteousness?
Being right with God.
And being right with God, right living. Okay? It's not right living for the sake of right living. It's right living because you're right with God, but we need to hunger for it, desire it so strongly in ourselves. You're seeking God's kingdom when you hunger and thirst for his righteousness, for what he wants to give you. And then after you get to this righteousness, be merciful. Extend mercy to other people. You're seeking the kingdom. Do you see how Jesus said here, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. You reach out to others. You extend mercy to people when they're in need. And it's going to be extended back to you. Sometimes not from people. Sometimes it's extended back to you from God. Always from God. But sometimes it actually comes through the hands of people. So being merciful is one way that you seek the kingdom. And here's another way. Have a pure heart. Anybody, what does that mean to have a pure heart? It says, Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. What's a pure heart? A perfect heart? A heart that... Say that again? Without sin. A heart without sin. Is there really a heart in a human body that's without sin? But what are we striving towards? We're striving towards just what Pat said, a heart without sin. We're striving for purity. We're striving to reach for what God would lead us to have no sin in our lives, to not be making wrong choices, to not be making undesirable thoughts turn into actions. Undesirable thoughts come, oh well. But what happens is what comes out of your heart. What do you do from that? Do you say, God, I'm really upset about this, or this really bothers me, I'm angry, or whatever it might be? That's not in your heart if you don't let it dwell there. Those are thoughts that come to your mind. And God allows that to be taken away from you if you give it to him, to take away the anger or the hurt. Sometimes I think one of the things that leads away from purity of heart is hurt. Hurt feelings, being upset, because you're focusing on yourself. Allowing God to take that away from you, take the hurt away so that you can seek after the truths that he wants to teach you and the openness that he wants to give you. The next thing he says is, be a peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers because they will be called sons of God. Do you know why they are going to be called sons of God? Being a peacemaker is a hard thing to do. It is not easy. And you know what? You can tell you're on the right track to being a peacemaker if everybody's aggravated with you. Because if you take sides, it's easy to get people who are behind you. You get someone with you and some against you. But when you're trying to draw people together and get them to give up some of their anger and animosity, you're trying to get them to give up some of the personal, selfish needs and come together in some way to reach an agreement, to reach a concord so they can move forward. Sometimes both sides are mad at you. They don't like what you're doing, that's why you're going to be called a child of God, a son of God, because you are doing God's work out there. You're seeking God's kingdom. You're trying to build the kingdom, because just like the Lord's Prayer says, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. You're trying to bring that peace of God to earth. This one's not easy. Suffer persecution because of righteousness. Be willing. This is how you seek the kingdom. Be willing to be treated badly because you love God and you're following Jesus' teachings. Don't say, golly, I'm following Jesus. I'm doing my best I can. Why are people treating me so badly? It's just not right. Guess what? Jesus was the perfect one who followed God's teachings perfectly, who led the life God wanted to have, and people treated him pretty badly. Get on the track with him. You're going to suffer. You're going to be put down if you're doing the right thing. Now, it doesn't say anything about suffering persecution just for the heck of it. You know what I'm saying? We need to make sure what we're doing is seeking what God wants for us. And if people don't like us for us or treat us badly, that's okay. Be willing to be insulted and falsely accused because of Jesus. Be willing to bear that where people make fun of you. I see a lot of times on Facebook people saying things about Christians and being weak and nanny-pandy and sort of silly and various things. They don't really think that but it's a strength. It's a strength to be able to follow Jesus. It takes power from God to be able to do it. So be willing to be insulted and falsely accused because of Jesus in your life. That's seeking the kingdom. It doesn't sound like it, maybe. We're not out there. It's not like we're going to be seeking, when you seek to find a place, you travel to that place. But for God's kingdom, we're not traveling to something. We're seeking it here. We're seeking to bring it here and to be part of it here. Then the next things that happened after he finished with the Beatitudes, Jesus said for us to be salt and be light. His teachings about salt and light talk about how those are salt is a change agent. It makes things taste better. It makes things taste differently. It brings out the best flavor in food. We need to be salt, so that we are being a change agent. We're helping bring out the best in any situation. And be light. Do you know, the one thing about light is, light exists. Darkness is nothing. Darkness is no light. When there is no light, you don't have to fight against darkness. All you have to do is shine. And automatically the darkness is pushed away. Okay, so what we need to be is God's light in the world, shining for him, showing his face through our actions, through our words, and through all that we are. So Jesus said to be salt, be light. If we're doing these things, we're doing what Jesus taught. We're seeking God's kingdom here on earth. Okay, then he says, don't break God's commands or teach others to do so. How easy is it to accidentally break a command? It can happen to us. One thing we don't want to do is get so caught in our error of our ways where we do make a mistake that we lead others to make the same mistake, that we lead others to break God's teachings, to go against what he wants. So we need to be careful because we don't necessarily realize how important we are, each of us individually, in the lives of others. God only has one plan for how to reach everybody else in the world. And he did that by sending one person, Jesus, as a human being who showed everything, who taught everything, who did what he was supposed to do. And he taught 12 others and 72. They taught, and then those people taught more than 3,000, the thousands at Pentecost. He wants each of us to be the way that someone else is reached by showing God's teachings through Jesus in ourselves. We couldn't know what to do if it wasn't for Jesus. Then it says, the next one is temper your anger. When someone expects you to blow up and you don't, you're seeking the kingdom. I didn't do a good job of this yesterday. I got really mad at Bob. Bob and I haven't had an argument, I'd say probably 15, 20 years. We just don't argue anymore. We got all that out of our system a long time ago. Yesterday I was so aggravated about something, and I just yelled at him. I did, and I didn't feel good about it. Later I had to go back very shortly and say, okay, first of all, I shouldn't have yelled. There was no reason to get so upset over it. But it was an important point to talk about because I felt strongly about what was going on. I don't think necessarily you can always hold your anger. Mostly I can, but I didn't yesterday. But I think apologizing and then seeking to start over new and trying to rebuild and talk about where you are and what the needs are. And part of the reason I got so angry is there's been this situation that keeps happening in my perspective, not in his perspective, because we have different perspectives, and I keep not saying anything. And then I got really mad. So sometimes it's better, ways to temper your anger is don't let things build up. Temper your anger by being willing to address things as they come up. And that's with other people, that's with your family, that's with coworkers, it's with the person driving down the road that cuts you off. What good does it do? What good does it do to get angry at that person that cuts you off? Not one bit. They don't even know you're angry. And if you do something to let them know you're angry, then you cause a bunch more trouble because that's called road rage and all kinds of bad things happen. So temper your anger. Learn to Recognize what's going to make you angry. Deal with it in what way you can. If you lose it, start over, make it your apology. Next thing is ways to seek the kingdom. Keep your body pure. All right? You know all the things. And this is, we talk a lot about, we don't have any children here, so like I said, we talk about sexual purity a lot. That's important. But there's a lot more than that. There's also ways we harm our bodies by ingesting things we shouldn't ingest, by eating things we shouldn't eat, swallowing things we ought not swallow. We can not be keeping our body pure if we overextend ourselves. Everyone's going to overextend yourself sometime. But if you are constantly beating your body up, you're constantly pounding on it with maybe excessive exercise or something like that, you're not helping your body. You're not keeping it whole and pure the way God wants it to be. We need to remember that keeping this physical body as healthy as we can is a way that we're going to be able to be people in the world so we can do all these other things. If our body breaks down, God understands when you can't do things. I know we've talked about Sister Jordan, who was a prayer warrior, and her body was really bad to her by the end of her life, but she prayed, and she made phone calls, and she had a ministry God gave her. Just because your body breaks down doesn't mean God won't use you, but know that it's your responsibility to keep health in your body. Don't cause another to sin by casting him aside. Did you know that you can lead people into sin by just shoving them off and saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you? Did you know you can harm people by doing that? It's not seeking God's kingdom. Jesus didn't cast people aside. He welcomed them in. He accepted people. He went and talked to people that he disagreed with. He chastised them sometimes, but he didn't just cast them aside and say, not going to have anything to do with you. He continued to engage people who are off track. He continued to reach out to them, and we need to make sure that we continue to engage people. I do want to say that sometimes when we have someone who's causing problems in our lives, causing us to struggle, or causing pain and harm in our lives, it may be necessary for us to separate ourselves from that person to protect ourselves. That's not quite the same as just saying, I don't want anything to do with you because you're worth nothing. Sometimes it's necessary to say, I need space for myself. I need to not allow you to harm me. That's part of keeping your heart pure and keeping your body pure. And yet, it's not the same as saying this person has no value. They're just worth nothing, and we can just shove them aside and ignore them. Don't cast people aside. Here's a really big one. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. How hard is that? Very hard sometimes. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Sounds like we always are going to have it right on track. It takes challenge sometimes to say, I said I would do it, I'm going to do it. Or I said I'm not doing it this time. I'm not, for whatever reason. Maybe God led you to say no. Maybe we're being asked to serve in a ministry and God told you no. You don't need to be taking on something else. And you feel guilty. So you think, well, I said no, but now I'm going to change my mind. No, sometimes you just need to say yes and mean it, or say no and mean it and let that be the end. Whatever it is, it might be saying what you mean and sticking with it has value in God's kingdom. Go the extra mile. We talked about where this was, if someone takes your cloak from you, give them your coat also, and if the soldier makes you walk a mile, go another mile. Because in those days, a soldier could grab any person they wanted and say, here, carry my gear, you have to walk with me and carry my stuff for the next mile. Like, Roman soldier could do that to anybody. So instead of complaining and fussing and carrying on, surprise the guy. When he grabs you and forces you to go a distance that you weren't planning to go an extra mile. Surprise him by doing more than what he's trying to force you to do. So, people talk about don't be a doormat. Sometimes, now this is going to sound funny. Let me just say this. See how I can say this. Sometimes it's okay to lay yourself down and say, go ahead, walk on me if you want to. It's not being put down. It's not being shoved to the ground, forced against your will, and allowing people to just walk over you. But sometimes it's okay to say, go ahead. You want to treat me badly? I'm just going to let you do it, and I'm going to go farther than what you wanted me to do. I'm going to allow it. In a certain circumstance, it's because God tells you that He wants you to do that. Sometimes you need to humble yourself, pull your whole self out of that, and say, go ahead. Not every time. God's not always going to call you to do that, but there are times when you need to put yourself aside and be willing to let someone use you the extra mile out of your own free will, out of your own love for Jesus in your heart. This is not an easy thing to do. People don't like the thought of it, but that's what Jesus said to do. When they grab you, don't just go as far as they wanted you to go, as they forced you to go. Voluntarily do more. Seek the kingdom. Love your enemies. We've covered that quite a lot. Loving enemies is not an easy thing to do. And the enemy that we think, well, gee, all those, ISIS over there, we are going to love them or something like that. Don't go there, okay? How about the person down the street, or that you sit next to in your office, or the person on your bus, or the person, wherever you are that is treating you badly? That's the person we need to work on. Yes, there's value in recognizing where people are treating people badly other places and not allowing that to get us down. But don't put it so far off. Look close to home and see where you need to care about people who don't care about you. Care about people who are treating you badly. Love your enemies. And then give quietly to the needy. Don't make a big show of it. Don't make a big deal about it. Here, we bring our food up and we offer to the needy right here. We bring it up. We don't go out there and put big signs up saying, come on the third Sunday and you can watch us as we bring our goods to feed people. Come in and see all this good stuff we're doing here. We're not doing that. We're humbly amongst ourselves, bringing forth the overabundance God has given us and making it available for people in need. Sometimes I might be standing in the grocery line. I know that Pat shared it. I can say this because she shared it publicly in our Sunday school closet. She's done this before. Been standing in the grocery line. Had someone in front of her didn't have enough money. She provides the difference in order to make up for the person to be able to buy their groceries. She doesn't then run outside waiting for, like, guess what I just did? I just paid the money for these people to be able to get their food. She doesn't do that. She just quietly sees a need and steps forward and does what it is. There's so many different ways that we do this by giving rides to people and doing different things. So when you give quietly to the needy, and here's a big one. Pray in private. Does that mean we should never let anybody see us pray? I don't think that's what Jesus was saying. I paraphrase it to say pray in private because he said, when you're praying, don't go out, stand on the street corners and make a big deal of it. Show everybody, okay, everybody, I'm praying now to God, oh God, and make it a big deal to everything. Your communication with God is personal. It's something that is between you and God. And you need to do that part very quietly and humbly. You can go in your closet, sit aside. How is that seeking the kingdom if no one knows what you're doing? It's because you're growing. You're building that relationship with God. You're making yourself closer to the image of Jesus. And that image then carries through. There are times to pray in public. There are times to do a large group prayer, or to pray with somebody, or to sit next to each other in a restaurant. Maybe you're going to pray over a meal. I don't think Jesus was talking about those things where you're still being quiet and humble about it. It's where you're calling attention to yourself. Okay, everybody, look at me. I am pious. I pray. That is what we're not supposed to do. We're supposed to make our prayers be something that helps us to grow. Then it talks about fasting. And I paraphrase this, and if you give up something for God, don't make a big deal out of it. It could be food. It could be watching TV. It could be buying a new car. It could be anything that you're doing. Don't make a big deal out of it. I remember reading a long time ago, crossing the switchblade, and I can't remember what the name of the guy is.
David Wilkerson.
David Wilkerson. I was not thinking about him. The guy he worked with a guy who came around. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that. But David Wilkerson, in what he was doing, felt led to sell all his stuff. He went out and sold his TV. He sold a car. He sold all kinds of stuff to simplify his life and then go out and do a ministry that God called him to do. Now, this is years and years later, he wrote a book sharing of what God did with him at that time. At the time, nobody knew he was doing it. Nobody knew he'd sold all his stuff out, except his, wife and close friends or something. They didn't make a big deal out of it. If you are giving up something for God, don't make a big deal out of it. Just do it. Seek God's kingdom by doing what he tells you to do, by hearing his voice. Okay, keep looking for those things that last in the eyes of God. Don't store up, they say don't store up gold and treasures on earth. And that's pretty hard here in our country because we have a lot of stuff. And in some ways we need stuff. We need our refrigerator because of the way our life is set up. We need to have a washing machine and dryer because of the way things are. But it's not the same as just filling your house with things you don't need. How many TVs do you really need? You know what I'm trying to say? How much stuff do you really need to pile up? How full are your closets? Think about things like that. Do you really need to go out and buy another outfit? Maybe you do. But maybe before you do that, maybe you need to clear out some stuff that you've got and put it out to be useful. My mom always said, it's not doing anybody good if it's hanging in your closet. If it's something you're not going to use, make it available to other people. Don't worry so much. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Don't judge. Not an easy thing we've got here. Right now, in these days, it seems that in our country, as we're struggling, as political things are going on right now, we're struggling, and people feel that anytime you disagree with them politically, you're judging them. I don't feel judged by other people who think differently from me politically, and I hope people who are different from me politically don't feel judged by me. We have different approaches to things, but we need to not judge each other and say, what is judging? You're worthless. You have no value. What you're doing is wrong. You're bad. You know what I'm saying? Even if someone makes a wrong decision, wrong decisions can be dealt with, but that doesn't make the person of less value, of no worth. And I think this is what judging does. Judging says you are of no value because of how you think or how you feel or what your actions are. We don't want to do that. Ask, seek, and knock as you pursue God. Keep asking God for things. Keep seeking what he wants. Knock on that door. Just keep knocking. There was a story that Jesus told about the guy who needed some bread, and he went to his neighbor, knocked on the door, knocked on the door. The guy didn't want to get out of bed. He said, come on, get up. I need help. Well, God is going to respect us for continuing to pursue him. Now, I don't think he's ignoring us like the guy that wouldn't get out of bed. But sometimes we can feel ignored by God. Sometimes we don't feel like he's hearing us. Sometimes we don't feel like we're getting an answer. So we need to keep pursuing God. Keep knocking, keep asking, and keep seeking. Follow the last traveled path. We're almost to the end here. I know this is a lot of stuff, but I want you to know I'm covering lots of things, and these are all small things. And we can do them all. And they become big. Follow the less traveled path. They talk about going through the narrow gate and following the narrow path. We don't need to flock down the road that everybody else is going to just because everyone else is doing it. My mom said, just because everyone else is doing it, do you have to do it too? Not necessarily. We need to listen to what God's saying. And sometimes, though, everyone else is doing is not the right path. And it could be people who are saying they're Christians, who are leading a certain direction, and God may say to you, stop. They're good people who are seeking me out. They're trying, but they've made a mistake in this area. Don't follow them down that path. That's the hardest, I think. It's easy to not follow people that you know are making decisions that are against the Bible, that you know are just what we call sin. It's easy to not follow them after you've been serving God for a while. It's harder to come up against a person that you know is truly seeking God and who's saying they're a Christian following Jesus' teachings and have gone wrong somewhere. And you need to love them and care for them, but don't take their path. take the harder route of saying, I'm sorry, I can't go there. Pay attention to what others are teaching about God. Listen to what they're saying. Hear what they're saying. Because some of them, there are false prophets out there, people who are saying the wrong things about God, untrue things about God, and you need to listen. You need to be aware of it. Don't shut your mind and say, oh, I'm not going to listen to them. You need to hear what they're saying. Know what they're saying. And know why it's a false prophet. Know why it's wrong. So pay attention to those things. And finally, follow Jesus' example. You can't go wrong and say, you know, that old thing, I was really kind of upset when the what would Jesus do fad came in. Because I read that book, In His Steps, years ago, where the preacher had come to his congregation and challenged them, saying, everything you do, stop and think, what would Jesus do in this moment? How would he react in this moment? What would be his choice? And it really struck his congregation, and it struck my heart to try to say, what would Jesus do? It became a fad. So it's a good idea if other people from the fad heard it and got the message, but I think a lot of times it became a thing around a bracelet or a thing, you know, this bumper sticker or something, but it didn't really touch a heart. But think about it. What would Jesus do? How would Jesus treat this person? What would he do in this business situation that I'm finding myself in? You know, you think a lot of times about a lot of other things that, you know, if it affects your business. What would Jesus do in this situation? Really important. And the final thing is, what will happen if you do all these things? And that scripture says, all these things that you need, all the things God knows you need will be added to you. They'll be given to you. I know I'm over. I'm really sorry. I got one thing to tell you, one little thing that I have to mention. I saw this on Facebook yesterday. I thought it was so good. Has anybody heard of suspended coffee? Suspended coffee? I don't know where this location was, but some place this started in a small cafe, and other places have been taking it up. The people will come in and say, I want to buy 5 coffees this morning, 2 to go and 3 suspended. And the person, they pay for 5 coffees, they take their 2 and they leave, and the person at the counter marks down 3. Somebody else comes in and says, I want to buy 4 coffees, 1 to go, 3 suspended. Pay for 4, take 1, mark down 3. Later in the day, in this place, a homeless man came walking into the cafe and says, do you have any suspended coffee today? They said, yes, we do. And they give him a cup of coffee and mark one of those off. Someone has paid for a cup of coffee for someone they don't know who might not even come in case somebody comes in needing something. This is a tradition they had there. And other places started picking it up where you would pay for coffee on a cold winter's day for someone that you don't know that might come in sometime during that day and need to be able to come into a warm place and have something warm in their stomach. That really touched me. To me, that's seeking the kingdom. You're seeking the well-being of others. Can we find other ways that we can do that to have our own style of suspended coffee? That thing that we're doing that is going to provide for someone that we don't know, that we've never met, and that may come into our lives. May come into someone else's life and we never ever see them. But we provide it for them. Seek